Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about advice for beginners, okay? People who are new to sword fighting or, medieval combat. And it doesn't matter which group that you play with, whether you're in HEMA or the SCA or some other live steel group. It doesn't make a difference. I played in a number of different groups, and I still do. And it's all good because it gives you different, different experiences, different, points of reference. So that really doesn't matter so much. But to start off my advice on this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a quote from Roger of Verdun. Okay, this guy lived from 1174 to 1201, and he was a chronicler for Richard the Lionheart. He went on the Third Crusade with him, and the quote goes like this: "No athlete can fight tenaciously who has never received any blows. He must see his blood flow and hear his teeth crack. Then he will be ready for battle." Okay, that's Roger of Verdun. Um, and I think that is like the best training quote I've ever heard. Okay, um, so basically, okay, so going beyond that, what's involved with sword training? Okay, well, first you have to look at yourself as an athlete. Okay, now it doesn't matter if you're in athletic condition, you're going to work towards that direction. Okay, but you have to go into this with the mindset of an athlete. Okay, this paper away. What that means is that you have to get into a regular training routine, and that's usually going to be at least once a week. Okay, so you're going to find some group in whatever organization you want to play with, and most likely they have a weekly practice. And if they don't have a weekly practice with that group, you may need to seek out a few other groups. You can still practice with your group of choice, but on the off weeks, you need to play with other groups as well. Okay, so you have to get into a regular practice of at least once a week. Okay, now it can be twice a week, but one of the things that I caution people is be careful not to burn yourself out, both physically and also mentally, because sometimes if you go into something a little too enthusiastically, where you're doing it like almost every day, people will tend to lose interest in it because they're just doing it too much. A classic example is that New Year's resolutions and people going to the gym. Okay, New Year's Day, a whole bunch of people walk into the gym. Some of them might last 2 weeks. A few more might last a month. Usually by March, most of the people that came in January are gone. Okay, so you have to go into this with a long-term goal, okay, of where you are, where you want to be, how how you're going to maintain yourself, and be able to do this continuously. So basically, if you're interested in swordsmanship, it has to be or should be a lifetime commitment. I've been doing this for 15 years. I expect to keep doing this as long as I physically can. Okay, now. Another thing that I'm going to recommend is, in addition to your sword training, you also need to spend time in the gym. Okay, at least twice a week. Sometimes, if you can do it 3 times a week, even better. But you need to spend time in the gym, because that once a week training is not going to be enough. Again, you have to approach this with the mentality of an athlete, and all athletes basically lift weights. It doesn't matter whether they're playing baseball, basketball, whether they're swimmers, runners. All successful high-level athletes lift weights. It is the most efficient way to get in shape and to stay strong. And strength does matter. Now you don't need to be as strong as me. You just got to be a little bit stronger than yourself. Okay. Now, by the way, I don't know if you guys are aware, but I am 47 years old, and I'm very active, and basically I work out. And I probably don't look like I'm 47 years old, and that's because I do all this stuff. I lift weights. I train at least once a week with the sword. Sometimes twice a week. This past week I did 3 practices. Now, going back to what I said about not burning out, what I did is I did a practice, let's say Tuesday night. Okay, that was a fencing practice. Okay, I mean not fencing as in classical fencing, fencing as in rapier. Okay, so that was a rapier practice, and this week I was actually practicing my case. Okay, rapier in each hand. Okay, so then on Wednesday, I did my sword and shield practice. Okay, so I went to a different practice, right? This was an SCA practice, armored combat. Doing sword and shield. Basically, we're all calibrated for male, so we're hitting full power, full speed. Okay, and then on Thursday, I went to a different practice, and at that practice, that was a cut and thrust practice. I was using the buckler. In fact, I was also fighting left-handed. I did also do some right-handed fighting, but I was primarily fighting left-handed. And I was also, so basically what I was doing is I was giving my body a chance to recover. So rather than fighting the same form, I was fighting some different form. So that's 3 practices in 1 week, and I don't do this every week. What I usually do is I'll do 2 practices a week. One will be either a rapier practice or cut and thrust practice, right, where we're using steel blades, light calibration, light hit, minimal armor, basically face mask, maybe knee, elbows, cups, throat protection, but very minimal armor. And the key to that is light calibration, so I'm really not, working my joints too hard at that practice. But then I'll do an SCA practice where it's full power, full speed, and I'm basically I'm really putting everything into my shots. So that's the other practice. So I'll usually do a practice like that, and then sometimes I'll do events on the weekends, right? But then what I will do is if I'm going to do an event on the weekend, I may cut out one of my practices during the week. And again, this is with the mindset that I don't want to burn myself out. And as you get older, this becomes more of an issue. It's an issue usually in the beginning with beginners because. Sometimes beginners will often burn themselves out because they're just going too hard, too fast, they're expecting too much. But usually once they get going, then they get into a period, where basically they know what they're going to be doing. They're training once a week, or twice a week, and they're maybe hitting the gym 2 or 3 times a week. So they get into a regular routine. And then what happens as you get older, then your body starts, saying, okay, we need to be a little bit more careful, and that's fine. I make sure I do my stretches before I fight and all that stuff. So that's the first thing that I want to put out there for you guys. The mindset. Okay, you got to have the right mindset, and you have to go into this with the mindset of an athlete. You're going to be training these days in the gym, these days, with the swords. So that's the first thing. Okay. Next thing, you gotta make sure you have your equipment. It's not. I don't mean the next thing, but the other thing that you gotta make sure is you gotta make sure that you have the right equipment, that you're comfortable in your equipment. You know how to maintain your equipment, and that's a big thing. And if you're doing armored combat, armor breaks. Especially the harder you're hitting the armor, the faster it breaks. I typically will go through my armor after every practice and look for broken rivets, broken straps. If you're going to be doing any armored combat, you're pretty much going to become an armorer. Okay, not necessarily a blacksmith where you're hammering out helmets, but you will know how to make minor repairs, how to work with leather. Leather working is kind of like one of those basic things that's easy to learn. So that's the other thing that's going to happen. And then the other thing is you want to basically, let's talk about how to approach the practice, okay? And this is one of the most important things when you go to practice. Okay, now you have some practices that are very instructional, right? Where you have people, right? Especially in the HEMA community, but also at some SCA practices, some life steel practices. Some of them are very instructional, where you're doing, have an instructor or 2 instructors there, and they're doing lots of drills, and that's fine. A lot of instructional practice. Now, if some practice, I've been to some practice, especially like HEMA practice, where that's all they do. It's just instructional, and that's fine. But I think that at some point you also need to, if that practice doesn't do any sparring, you also need to find another practice where you can actually do live sparring. Okay, Going back to that original quote that I said, oh, you have to feel those blows. One of the things I've also done in my life is boxing. Okay, I've done some boxing, and there's nothing quite like you're trying to do something, you're trying to move a certain way, and all of a sudden you get hit in the face, and you get hit in the face when you're boxing, and basically things kind of go white for a second. Okay, so basically through that whiteness that you see, you have to basically keep it together, keep your arms up, keep moving, through that, keep fighting. So you have to get used to that shock of being hit, and be able to keep fighting through it, and basically pull yourself back together, and continue to fight. Doing some boxing is also a good preparation for doing sword fighting. Okay, it's a different type of hitting. Now, especially in the SCA, I have been hit with some pole arms where it kind of felt like I was being punched, where I actually did see some white. I saw a little bit of a blackout for a second there. So that's also going to happen a little bit in the SCA, especially if you're fighting with some heavy pole arms, or if somebody hits you, with the short of their sword, if they hit you with the forte. Occasionally you might black out for a second there, but it's not like you're going to get hurt. It's just like you kind of get shocked. You have to be able to fight through that. That's part of swordsmanship. Swordsmanship is combat. Okay, and also the other thing is that you got to get used to fighting in different weather. In the part of the country that I'm in, we have really cold winters and we have really hot summers. Okay. In the wintertime, it gets very cold. Now, usually in the wintertime, the practices tend to be indoors, but we do a couple of fights. We do a couple of events in the fall. Basically in the fall, it's like sometimes 40 to 50 degrees, and we're outdoors. We're fighting, so we're fighting in some pretty cold weather. Now, now in the summertime, it gets really humid. It's almost like like you're struggling to breathe. Okay, so especially in the summertime, you gotta get used to fighting, under that, in that humidity, with that, in that with the heat, and learn to deal with it. One of the ways that I've learned to deal with fighting in armor, when it's, I think at one point this, one of my practices this summer, the heat index was well over 100 degrees. Okay, not too far over 100, but it was right about 100 degrees. And what I will typically do is I'll bring a jug, a gallon of water. I'll take a sip of water. I'll take the water. I'll just dump it right on my head, and I'll let it flow inside my gambeson and cool me down. And then soon after, I'm ready to keep fighting. So basically, I've learned to deal with the hot weather. So that's one of the things that you'll do. Now, you may end up dealing with it a little bit differently, but you got to figure out how you're going to deal with the hot weather. Okay. Now, lastly, one of the most important things is that when you go to practice, you have to kind of go there with an open mind. And a lot of times you'll go to one practice, and you'll hear one thing. You go to another practice, you hear another thing. Sometimes within the same practice, you will hear what appears to be conflicting advice. And you have to kind of learn how to deal with that. Okay. Now, first thing is, if you have somebody that's giving you some advice. Well, first of all, before I even say that, anybody that you fight, if you're doing a sparring match, anybody that you spar with, after you finish sparring with them, what you're going to do is you're going to ask them for some feedback. And it doesn't matter if they're better than you, equal to you, or even below you. Okay. After you guys are done fighting, take off your helmet or your fencing mask. And you say, so what'd you think of the fight? What'd you see? Any openings you saw? What was I doing that was effective? Because not only are you helping yourself, but you're also helping them. So even if this is somebody that, obviously if this is somebody that's way better than you, you're looking for advice on how you can improve. But even if it's somebody at your level or below your level, what you're doing is by having this discussion, you're helping them out. Okay, now you don't necessarily need to dictate to them, well, you should do this, you should do that, you should do that. You say, okay, what you just ask them, what was I doing that was effective? Okay, what do you think that you were doing that was effective? And you just have a conversation like that, and it'll get them to think a little bit, and it'll also get you to think a little bit in ways that that will surprise you. Okay, So that's sparring match. Now, as far as instructors, you know, when you go to a practice, it doesn't matter if you know the stuff already or if you've heard it from somebody else in a different way, and the instructor is giving it to you completely different, and you disagree with it. Listen to what they have to say. Absorb it. On the way home as you're driving, that's when you really want to think about, okay, is this something that makes sense for me? Is this something that will work for me? Is this going to fit into the style that I'm fighting? You know, because, you know, you might be fighting, you know, let's say if you're a fencer, you might be fighting Fabrice, and they might be, and they might be trying to teach you capoeira or something, you know. So, you know, you have to, you know, on the way home, that's when you kind of decide if this is something that's going to work for you, or if you can take parts of it. But don't sit there and argue with the instructor telling him that what he's saying is wrong, or even if it's just a sparring partner and he's giving you some advice, you know, don't say, you know, don't just kind of blow it off. Accept what they have to tell you, you know, take it into your head, think about it, and then you decide on your own whether it's something that's going to help you or not help you, okay? So that's actually one of the most important things as far as becoming good. Getting feedback from people, okay? You know, any way you can, get as much feedback from people. You know, sometimes, you know, I will get feedback from people that I just know it won't work for me. But I'll still listen to them, because I might hear something that, you know, in all of that, I might hear something that might actually help me. And then what also happens a lot of times, I hear things that doesn't work for me, but down the road I might run into somebody else, and it might be something that works for them, and I can pass that advice along to them. Okay, so everything that you hear, you know, if you can try and you know, even if it doesn't work for you, try to file it away in the back of your head, because you may not be able to do it, to use that, but somebody else later on might be able to use it, or you yourself later on might come back to it, because your fighting style will change, you know, over the course of time. You might start fighting in a different way than you're currently fighting. So down the road, you may come back to that. So a couple of things for you guys to think about. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it. If you're not a member of my channel, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.